So does it sound like the board is still supportive of this and following with EPA's guidance to let it go to hearing and gather more information?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the question then becomes, what do we put in as what we're having a hearing on? We suggest all these changes and then put that out to the public with these changes and say, okay, this is what we're having a hearing on it's changing to 100, or do we? And is that what they get to comment on?
As opposed to
having, okay, here we will have the original that we sent to Ecology, and then we'll have a changed one. Which one do you put in the paper? The changed one.
Well, I think
proposed change.
I think it's the proposed changes, and that's sort of the preliminary guidance that you're giving staff right now.
Right.
What the county wishes to propose for public hearing.
And then we can change that further based on what we hear from the public and what gets put into the record, whatever arguments are made at that time. Okay.
And maybe that no greater than that required and the minimum demonstrated necessary may mean the same thing, but it's not clear.
And it does show in essentially in bill format, so that this version in the table shows what is existing in the locally approved program, and the underline and strike through shows what would be changed.
Okay.
You kind of get all in one package.
All right.
So the minimum demonstrated necessary for safety is a decision by PCD, basically.
That part, I think,
Yeah, let's see. So it's on F5. Oops. There we go.
yes, the minimum under that threshold would be discussion with the applicant and the goals of the proposal. But then exceeding the 100 feet would be a shoreline variance.
Exceeding would be 100, but if individual had to go out 40 feet to be able to tie up a boat comfortably, could the county hold him 40 feet, or could he still go to 100 feet? Yes.
We'd also look at the process. So if it's a substantial development in the condition use.
We can check the use table, but I think it'd be SDP. Yeah, I mean, that's the point of having that language, is demonstrated necessary. So as part of the review, the applicant needs to provide evidence as to if they're going to propose a 100-foot dock, and in reviewing that information, the county may have further discussion with the applicant on that. You know, here's the conditions of the site, what size is the vessel, that kind of thing, and determine what is the minimum necessary.
So the process is a conditional administrative, and so it would be DCD making the decision, but Ecology has the final say on the conditional use. So it doesn't go to a public hearing.
But Ecology does get review, and Ecology's role with all conditional use permits is to not hold different standards, but just to ensure that the county is implementing our SMP as it's written.
Okay, I think I got that. Am I reading the right thing here? Mine says new 2/22/11. Okay, wrong.
On the table that you're looking
Yeah,
at,
the table.
it should show revised 2/22/11.
Okay. That's
Is that the one you
The
have?
bottom right-hand corner.
The footnote there?
revised 2/22. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I've got the right.
Yeah.
table.
That's a good place to start.
Okay.
So shall we plan to include this one?
I think so.
Okay, great, thank you. The next issue is the one of finfish aquaculture, including net pens, and that's items 13, 14, and 15 on the table. List of 61.
When you say plan to include in the public hearing notice, you mean, or in the,
Oh, on the docs,
yeah,
along the dock,
what did you mean when you said plan to include?
In the revisions.
in the revisions that the board wants to
Okay,
send back.
And I would suggest that once the board has gone through and identified what it wants to propose, then probably looking for some sort of recommendation from staff and legal on which of those items to include in as part of the public hearing.
okay, and we also need a motion approving them at the end, if you have a list of.
Sure, I think what we envisioned is creating a new document, which is actually the board's proposed revisions. Yeah, but that would be what would be up for the public hearing.
And that could come back when we have our notice of public hearing, so the board would get another chance to look at the document and approve the publication.
And if you're aiming for the 28th of March, you have to publish by the 16th of March, which is not this Wednesday, but a week from Wednesday.
Yeah, so next Monday, they need to finalize the notice.
And Commissioner Austin will be back for that.
Okay, so on the fin fish and net pen issue, the ongoing question has sort of been to make sure that the county clearly understands Ecology's rationale for requiring essentially a retraction of the complete prohibition of them. And so again, more conversation with Ecology last week. Excuse me. Confirmed, I think, what our staff understanding had been is that indeed, as a water-dependent use, it is preferred by the Shoreline Management Act, and that further, Ecology did not see what they felt was adequate science in the county's record to support that kind of a complete prohibition. So, there's, Ecology did confirm that by them saying you can't completely prohibit fin fish and net pen aquaculture, they are not saying you have to allow it everywhere. They are amenable to the county placing some amount of limitation on those type of operations. It's just that it can't be a complete limitation on those.
How do they consider this in regard to the Whatcom approach? Have you talked to them about that?
We did touch on that a bit. That was another item where they were going to talk more internally with the staff that had worked directly on the Whatcom County Shoreline program, and at this point I haven't heard back from that. So we don't have any more specificity on that. It seemed like, generally speaking, that was an approach that Ecology would consider as acceptable. I mean, obviously it's in the Whatcom SMP standing today, so.
And that was never litigated from what that was never litigated from what I could tell in the hearings board or in the Court of Appeals.
So
The issue got narrower and narrower by the time we got to the Court of Appeal, but it was never even litigated in front of the hearings board,
okay.
which would have been the first body to hear whether or not the SMP passed muster, lawful muster.
So in the challenges that happened with Whatcom County, the net pens issue wasn't addressed.
That's what I can tell. I have calls into various people, but there was nothing in the litigation that says that it was an issue brought to the hearings board in the original petition. There were public participation in critical areas were the two things that the citizens organization brought up, and then the BIAW was an intervener in the hearings board case and went all the way to the Court of Appeals. And the Court of Appeals case has been granted review by the State Supreme Court in November of 2010. So the county commissioner should be aware of that.
So it's not a done deal yet.
Well, the case law right now says that is a state regulation not subject to 82.02, but the State Supreme Court can change its mind on that.
Also, just to note more for those listening today, that what Mr. Alvarez is talking about is that while this has not been litigated through appeals, it should be noted, however, that the was something that was approved, affirmatively approved by the State Department of Ecology.
Right.
And just to clarify, you know, what we're talking about is the fact that the Whatcom SMP prohibits salmon net pen operations, but the rest of their aquaculture provisions do address allowances for net pens.
Yeah. Yeah, they,
Net pens other than salmon.
they end up prohibiting commercial
Yes, thank you,
shellfish.
commercial
Or
salmon.
finfish aquaculture,
Right.
but they do,
Allow for early release, natural run.
Yeah, they have allowances,
Finfish.
much like what we have for when it's a net pen function related to salmon restoration, wild salmon restoration efforts.
yeah, so it's a very narrow window there that's open.
For salmon.
For that kind of experimental project, which is talked about in the WACs about, you know, experimental, you know, issues being brought forward. Yeah, I found the Whatcom approach acceptable. I guess that gets back to my questions of, you know, just because I'm sure this has been in the record, you know, the Whatcom County SMP, but if the background information is also part of the record, and making sure that that's there if that's the direction we decide to go, and it's actually a direction that would be acceptable to me to do. And it seems like it was acceptable to Ecology at one point, so
Yeah,
I hope they'd
right.
be consistent. So I would encourage you to look at Whatcom's SMP related just to these narrow issues and give us an option that reflected those.
And I would agree, direction to go.
And particularly in theirs, it's friendly here, it's 23.100.03 is their aquaculture section, and they have in the section A11, they talk about the experimental projects, and then as you get into B1, kind of G through K, they get into the prohibition language and the conditions, and then also S. And then also 3, 4, and 5 in the section. So, yeah, I think they were getting very much at the concerns that we had in doing what we did, and I would appreciate their feedback a little sooner. We could, but now's the time, I guess. So, be encouraged to hear what they have to say.
The other question that arises is whether or not you want to put the word finfish in front of aquaculture.
That's,
I mean,
I think we had gotten
Okay.
guidance from the board last week
I
that they
just-
did want to include that.
Yeah, we would separate those two out because I see it was
Okay.
very different.
Okay.
and
And then also that upland finfish aquaculture really is agriculture, according to the WAC. Brought that up, I think, last week. So that's different than the net pens out in the water too. It's, I think according to the WAC, it is considered upland finfish aquaculture is considered ag. So it should be under the ag section, and I don't think we put it under the ag section.
No, in fact, our current code specifically mentions that you need to follow the aquaculture provisions. I mean, yes, it is mentioned as, you know, included as ag there, but, you know, when you look at Ecology's requirements for both upland and marine finfish operations, they're pretty similar, and yeah, it depends which lens you take a look through, whether upland finfish aquaculture is grouped more with ag or if it's grouped more with aquaculture.
as we change the finfish aquaculture